Welcome to another episode of In the Nude. Today I want to talk about, Welcome to another episode of In the Nude. Today I want to talk about practically how to come back to yourself, how to not abandon yourself in triggers, in hard situations, by giving you literal examples of things that I did, reacted, triggered, and how I coach with myself in them. So spoilers, this is going to be some stories about Rachel being crazy and how Rachel sat with my Rachel crazy, okay? I'm going to give two examples and walk you through what happened with them in hopes that what I did, my crazy story, will help you see how you can, one, be crazy with other people, and two, how you can practically be with yourself and not abandon yourself in the midst of those situations. Okay, so first is a more frivolous, silly situation that maybe like Rachel is extremely crazy. Okay, so I have a neighbor who's on one side of me that is an older gentleman, very sweet, and he is meticulous in keeping his yard, very safety conscious, has the vest that he puts on and the blinkers, and he has a hazard mask so he doesn't he's very, very, very particular about his yard and how he does his yard. I noticed I hadn't seen him because he comes by the house usually once a week, and I hadn't seen him in 2 weeks, and his yard was starting to grow large, tall, in the front. And I had already mowed the front of my yard, but my backyard wasn't mowed because I usually let my oldest do that to make an income because it's flat and easy for them to be able to do that. So my backyard's a chaotic, wild mess, but my front yard's nice and clean. And his front yard is not. And I know how my neighborhood is about front yards. So I sat there and I was like, you know what? I have the time. I can go over and I can at least mow part of this today. But silly me. I did not eat breakfast or drink water before I went. That comes into play later in the craziness. But anyway, so I go out and I start to mow the grass. And this hill is like one of the deaths. It is like sheer cliff face, a big ravine. And it is an exorbitant amount of energy, to which I have so much respect for this, what I assume is somewhere in their 70s neighbor who mows this front yard. I'll have you in sections, but wise on his part. So I go out there to mow the grass. And I'm mowing, and I'm hot, because even though it's in the morning, it's still hot. And then a neighbor that is 2 houses down on the other way comes over with his mower and mows the front yard. I start to panic. Did these two neighbors have some type of agreement that he was supposed to mow his yard? And I've just now stepped on the toes of this neighbor who was supposed to be doing this, and then somehow implied he was being derelict in his duties and his kindness to this neighbor that they agreed to by coming over and mowing this yard because I had no agreement. And I start to spiral about how I'm going to apologize to this neighbor who's coming over to mow this grass, right? And you may already think I'm crazy, but it gets more crazy, okay? So I start to feel all of those things. And then I also start to feel my autoimmune disease kick in, because when I haven't eaten, when I haven't drinking, and then I put myself in self-exertion, I literally start to see the dark circle, like you're gonna pass out. So I decide, okay, Rachel, this is enough mowing for right now for multiple reasons. One, you need to, sit with yourself, calm down, and figure out how and what is reasonable about conversing with this neighbor. Two, you can't continue mowing if you're about to pass out. So I go to put my mower back towards my yard, and I come inside and I drink some water, and I try to re-regulate my actual body, right? Because I am extremely overheated and I'm close to being passed out, and I've gotten so far that I'm extremely nauseated. So I'm sitting inside my house trying to cool myself off. I get an ice cold shower. All the while I am panicking, because now I can hear another neighbor has joined in on the mowing the other neighbor's yard. So now there's two neighbors that are mowing the yard that I started to mow, and I'm wondering again, okay, is this something that they agreed to, that I need to apologize? How do I step into this situation? How do I own what happened and what I thought and where they are, and make sure that I'm not stepping on anybody's toes or not trying to say anything negative when the worst situation in Rachel's mind happens? They decide to come over to my backyard and mow my backyard and weed eat around my house. As someone who has always had strings attached to someone helping me, I go in full spiral. I go into my closet and I start trying to take deep breaths so I don't hyperventilate over the amount of pressure that I feel right now, the amount of shame that I feel. Because I automatically have this feeling that not only I offended them for having gone over to the neighbor's yard, but now I have so deeply offended them because my backyard wasn't mowed that they are now being like, oh, really, you want to do that? Well, let me show you, right? Again, you may think this is entirely insane and crazy. My experience is I have had people in my life who have done that to me, who have done that and spoken about it openly in front of me about doing it to other people. This is not a foreign concept for someone to have done those things. It is not necessarily the standard average for somebody to do, but I'm sitting there and I am spiraling. I'm thinking through, there's no way I can pay them back. I can't owe them and there's no way for me to pay them back. This man has a zero-turn lawnmower, so mowing his yard is not going to pay him back. There's not enough, I don't have enough financial situations to try to pay him back. I can't, a thank you isn't going to cover it. There's so this weight of in debt is falling on me alongside of this weight of shame and guilt for the fact that I must have stepped on the toes of all of these situations, and then I didn't have my yard taken care of. How ostentatiously rude of me to have thought that I could help a different neighbor. I'm sitting there having all of this happen. And that's a part of who I am, spiraling in these experiences and thought processes of what I've lived through in the past. But that's not all of me, because all of me is also able to observe me having this spiral, right? So as best I can, I partition myself. I have this crazy person who isn't actually crazy, but traumatized person who's responding to these situations and feeling like these things are going to happen. And I have the other person, another part of me, who's just allowing myself to sit with myself. I sat in that closet and I took some deep breaths because I had gone out to mow. My kids were watching a movie for screen time that they could enjoy, so I had this freedom to be able to process this myself. I'm in my closet, I'm taking deep breaths, and I'm saying to myself, it's okay. It's okay. You're allowed to feel that way. There have been people in your life who have done that. It's reasonable for you to think it. It may not be true though. But right now we can just sit in what you feel. Maybe we'll use the sounding board in a little while to test case and see what might be a reasonable reaction. But I sit there with myself in this closet in the uncomfortable, and I don't want to. I want to escape. I want to go seize control. I want to go make a lemonade and somehow apologize and do instead of be. But I forced myself to sit there in the discomfort with myself. Take deep breaths. Drink some water. And say, it's reasonable. No wonder. You've had people who manipulated and gaslit and coerced. It's fair that you would automatically assume. It's fair. It may not be true, but it's fair. And it's okay for you to feel overwhelmed. Their actions, their feelings, they're not yours. They're not yours to control. They're not your responsibility. It isn't. You don't have to take it on. But it's okay. We're just going to sit here because you have. You have taken it on, and you've taken on when it may not actually be their feelings. But it's okay. After I calmed down a bit, I texted one of my best friends, and I relayed the situation to that person to get a sounding board, a grounding stone, after I had sat with myself. And they, of course, bounced back an alternative reality that I thought could be true, but just couldn't fathom and pull it into myself. That they, too, saw the same problem that I saw. That my neighbor hadn't cut his yard. And they thought, hey, Rachel's going to cut that yard. We can help her, too. Rachel's a single mom. We can contribute and jump in. It's a Saturday. We have the time. And they started mowing the grass. I duck out. I don't know what their thought process was on that, but then they are finishing up, and they're like, we already have the stuff out. Her backyard's tall. This running lawnmower will take care of it very fast. Oh, there's not that much to weed eat. We'll just go ahead and help Rachel out. That was the sounding board that responded back. And yes, that is a logical conclusion to someone who has had experiences with people just being people. And I needed to hear the logical conclusion, because even though I couldn't receive it as that was likely true, it was good to have sat with myself and also have seen what I was placing onto other people. I was placing my trauma onto another person. I was placing my presuppositions and my experience with coercion onto another person. I then, at this point, did make the excuse of making some lemonade because it was hot and one of my neighbors that had helped was still outside. So I went over and took a glass to him and his wife, and I had a quick conversation saying thank you and I'm sorry for having ducked out with no explanation. Explained that I was silly, that I had forgotten to eat. And it turns out my best friend was correct. Based on the conversation, that was exactly what happened. But no matter what was real, no matter what their perception, their desire, their thought process, any of that, no matter what that was, for me, in that moment, those feelings, that impact, that trigger was real. And no matter how much I sit there and try to logically debate with myself about the craziness of how I responded to reality, I still have to sit with that part of myself. I still have to give empathy to that part of myself because its experiences gave it that response. Compassion, understanding, sitting with myself is how I can help myself make a pathway out of that situation, where I can then the next time maybe not respond as triggered. Another situation, my parents, my mom came to visit, okay? Backstory is simply my parents did so much of what they could, and they did what was best for them and what they were capable of. But what that capable was way better than what they had, but was not enough, okay? That's the baseline. Complete respect for what my parents could break, also hurt for what they couldn't, right? I do really well at not responding and not coping with life as old Rachel. And the old coping mechanisms where I abandon myself and I fawn and I distance myself from my own feelings to take on somebody else's feelings and just hollow myself out for somebody else. I do really well at that in the general populace. But nothing proves in the pudding how far you are along until you put yourself in really old situations and really old scenarios where they're hardcore ingrained for you to cope in different ways. My mom came to visit. And even in my own home, which I cope better in my own home versus when I go to my parents' house, I struggle deeply with continuously my body, my brain, it all just wants to default to childhood Rachel, where I felt completely solely responsible for my parents' happiness and well-being, specifically my mother. I want to default back into trying to appease everything and make it happy because I still have this instinctual feeling that somehow my safety, my survival is connected to them being okay, them feeling okay, them not being angry, them not being sad. So in this scenario, when my mom was actually here, I did really well. I did really well at doing what I call a bubble exercise, where I visualize myself inside of a clear bubble, think like childhood bubble. And that bubble is my moat, my safety, my castle, where I can see and I can feel her feelings, but I don't have to pull them into myself. I don't have to take them onto my responsibility, where I can see it all and I can respond with compassion and empathy and grace and understanding, but I don't have to take it on like it's my responsibility to adjust things or change things to try to manipulate those feelings to be different than they are, try to get her a happier ending. I did really well with that. I did really well with setting boundaries and being clear about I'm not going to discuss this. I did really great at those things. I really did really great with sitting with and hearing what she wanted to say and what she had to say. I did really well with deciding what battles and what truths were worth communicating over and which ones were just okay to allow, even if it didn't match my experience. I did really well with centering myself because I've done so much work when I'm on my own. So much work of practicing allowing difference, allowing there not to be right, where I don't have to prove my truth, where I don't have to prove my answers. I did really well with all of those things. In the moment, I had no triggering, I had no reflex reactions. I instead responded. I did really well while she was here. And in that, there were some tough conversations where my mom shared that understandably she wishes she could be part of my healing journey instead of being pulled distance from me. And that's completely fair. As a mom, I understand completely why she would want to be a part of that process. But also as the person who's trying to do the best by myself and help and heal and be the best mom I can, it's not a thing that I can handle doing. But those conversations were hard, and I was able to see her feelings and address them where they are and give empathy where they are without taking them on in the moment. But when she left, there's this childhood part of me who couldn't handle my mom's sadness. It stayed quiet while she was here. It allowed the other healed parts of me to deal with and engage with. But when she left, that childhood person shattered. Felt so completely awful and guilty. Started having hissy fits and breakdowns inside of myself about how horrible of a person I was for not have mitigating. How horrible a person I was to not have the strength to be able to deal and cope and heal in the proximity to people who have caused the wounds. That childhood self was so desperate to try to make my mom happy that it was attacking me inside of myself. Okay? I don't know if you've ever experienced that. I'm assuming probably at some point you have. So what did I do in that situation? Well, in the past, I lashed out. It's not helpful. That part of you, that childhood part of you, is stuck in a very particular part and point in life and history where your safety, where your livelihood, where your security was completely attached to that. And they're still stuck thinking you're still in that stage. So as crazy as it sounds, I have conversations with the different parts of myself when I can feel the different pieces of me going crazy. When I sit and I'm like, I'm feeling frazzled right now, but why? And instead of just trying to distract, which is so much more fun than sitting with it, like scrolling or playing a random game or watching a show or reading a book, like any of it is so much more fun than sitting there with yourself and that uncomfortable. When you sit down with yourself, when you sit with yourself and you say, okay, I don't understand why I'm feeling frazzled. What's going on? There's an answer that'll come back. And maybe you have to practice to be able to hear yourself. It wasn't always as simple for me to hear the answers from myself as it is now. So it might take, what do you need right now? What will help you right now, right? And it might take listening to yourself and following your gut. It may take baby steps before you can actually get like deep in the weeds of having these like internal conversations, as crazy as it sounds. But that's what I do now after taking those baby steps of trying to say, okay, does this sound better or does this sound better? And kind of lean, oh, I don't like that. You know, like it's kind of like when you're trying to pick out an ice cream flavor and you don't know, and then you're like, decide in your head, okay, I'm going to pretend like I'm choosing chocolate, and your body's like, no, never mind. And you're like, oh, okay, so I didn't want chocolate. And you can eliminate, right? In that same way, you can do that with things that will help your body when you're in a frazzled state. Does taking a bath sound good? Yeah, no. Or does taking a bath or taking a shower sound better? Or does sitting in the quiet, dark closet with a blanket sound better? Or does going for a walk outside, like, you know what I mean? Like test casing things that might help your body, right? Anyway, so in this moment of my childhood self freaking the fork out, what did I do? I sat with myself like I would my kid. Visualize what you would do for a small child or your best friend if they were freaking out like that. I sat down by myself in my head, essentially. And I didn't say anything for a while. I just sat with it, existed. And after a while, I said, it's fair you're upset. It's fair you're scared. It's understandable. We're okay. We don't have to feel okay, but we are okay. After a while of that, the childhood self kind of relaxed a little bit. A little bit of the clenched tension went away. And then I said to my childhood self, we're no longer a kid. We're an adult. We have our own place, and our own safety is not dependent on the happiness or joy, and it is not in danger with the anger or sadness of any other. We are safe. It's okay to be sad for our mother's sadness. It's okay to be hurt with our mother's hurt. But her feelings are not our responsibility. Showing up loving, that's our responsibility. Showing up to take care of ourselves and take care of our kids, that's our responsibility. Making sure that we're not self-isolating and not testing the bounds of our healing, that's our responsibility. Making sure not to test ourselves too much, not to push ourselves too far so we end up frazzled or broken or shattered or reverting back to old coping mechanisms because of the stress and tension, also our responsibility. We're okay to feel uncomfortable with somebody else's discomfort. It's uncomfortable for sure, especially when you felt responsible for other people's discomfort, other people's happiness, other people's sadness, other people's anger, that you were the person who had to mitigate it, take it away. It's fair, but it is not our job any longer. Arguably never should have been. We have to be comfortable with other people's discomfort, so long as we're not being malicious, so long as we're trying to, in love, take care of ourselves and our kids and do what is best and create safety and boundaries without aggression or anger. We're okay. And then I pointed back to how we have been safe for the last 4 years. Well, lots of feelings had happened, and lots of things of processing have happened, and lots of repressed memories have come to fruition. The last 4 years, we've been safe. And to please trust me till I prove that I'm untrustworthy, that will keep us safe. Now, did it make it perfect, Keen? No. But it did dissipate the situation. It did make it so that I didn't have this constant flaring of gigantic feelings. Do you ever have these big feelings? You're like, man, I don't understand where it's coming from. And some part of you wants to have justification. Some part of you wants to know the why of what's going on, the what caused it. And that's an intellectualization that we like to do, because it's really nice to have the reasons and the why. And sometimes there are reasons and there are why, but sometimes it isn't because of an actual thing outside of us, but it's an internal thing within us. Whether it's our body remembering a memory that we don't even quantify in our calendar as something that happened, or if it's just simply, the last little straw on the giant pile of tiny things that have added up. But the why, the precipice for these big feelings and why they exist isn't necessarily as important as internally the why and the what. What do you need? This morning, I had this deep pitted, with no reason whatsoever, anxiety, desire to grasp for control. This must clean, must do, must achieve, much. And I sat there and I didn't know where it was coming from. I had woken up, I had a calm morning. There was nothing to have triggered anxiety, but I was sitting there feeling clenched and anxious. So I sat with myself. Even though I didn't want to, the last thing I wanted to do was sit with myself. I wanted to get up and sweep the entire house and clean the entire house, watch something and play a game, anything, read a book. I didn't care as long as I didn't have to sit with it, because the last thing I wanted to do was sit with it. I just wanted to escape it. But I forced myself to sit with it because I've found that while some manner of escape is helpful, for example, if you're sitting in a really, really dirty room and your brain is completely scattered and jumping all over the place because of the stacks of books and the different things that are everywhere, maybe taking a second and allowing yourself that momentary release of just clearing the area you're going to be in to try to be, so your brain can focus better, that might be helpful. It depends on the time. You can test case to see if it works for you. This morning, that's all I did. I cleared my back porch. It had a couple toys on it, a couple pairs of shoes. I cleared it off, and it just sat there, and I asked, why? Why? was I feeling this chaotic grasp. And it's because I was feeling insecure. I was feeling, and not insecure in the sense of insecure about myself, but I was feeling insecure in my surroundings. Like if I didn't do something, that my life would become unstable, that I'd somehow not be able to pay my mortgage or put food on the table for my kids, that if I didn't achieve enough, that I was sitting there and I had this feeling, this like tension that starts in your chest but then clenches around your stomach and into your feet and your shoulders and your neck and your forehead, where you have this like slowly but surely grasping and closing almost of your breath, where you feel so overwhelmed, like you're almost underwater. You can't get enough air. There was a part of myself that reverted back to when life was what I had to do. That in order for me to survive the day, I had to make sure I got stuff done. In order for my safety, in order for my feeling secure, in order for my anything, my worth. It was linked to achievement. It was linked to productivity. That part of myself was flaring up and panicking because this experience in life that I'm in right now is not a lot of do, it's a lot of be. It's a lot of allow, it's a lot of flow. And it's the antithesis of every coping mechanism that I've incurred and divulged and contrived as a child, trying to cope with my life. As a young adult, trying to cope with my life, perfectionism, workaholism, escapism into work and clean and do and productivity. Type A, take control, do it all, hypervigilance, hyperdependence. That's what my coping mechanisms were. And that part of myself has been sitting there quietly, allowing things to pass by, allowing me to try to exist, or allow the house not to be perfect. And it became that part of me couldn't handle it anymore because it so desperately felt like it was drowning. It felt like, do you not see the danger you're placing yourself in? Because if you're not achieving, you haven't ranked up, you haven't gotten a promotion, you haven't gotten more. You need that more, whatever that next thing is. That checklist isn't checked off. There's still things on there. Those feelings, that anxiety, that was all building up from that one part of that person. So I again sat with myself and that person. And you'll notice the pattern. I start with, I get that. Get that. We lived through that. It makes sense. It makes sense you feel that way. That served us for so long. And I'm so grateful for how vigilant you were for all of that time. It's fair that you feel panicked right now when we don't do that. It's new, it's different for you. I get that. And I just sat with myself in that feeling, with that empathy, without trying to make excuses or solve problems. In the same way, when you have a bad day, you don't want somebody sitting there going, oh, well, here's the solution. You just want somebody to be like, man, yeah, that did stink. Oh, that sounds like a bad day. You just want somebody catharsis with you, like to sit there with your feelings. So that's what I did with myself. That's the first thing that I do. And then after I sat with myself and I say something like, it's reasonable, it's fair that you responded that way, I then move into, our safety is no longer linked. Our value, we may not fully comprehend, we may comprehend, but we may not fully embody. Our worth isn't attached to doing. And I get that's a concept that's like really hard for this particular part of myself to deal with, because it is just like so ingrained, swallowed. It's like almost a part of the blood and the working and the muscles, like every cell in this part of myself cannot seem to embody the idea that worth is not associated with productivity. Other parts of me can get it. This part is so difficult to try to accept that. So I speak compassionately to that. It's fair. You've been the one who's been vigilant in making sure we were safe for so long. Thank you. We are no longer, our safety is no longer indicative of other people around us. We create our safety. We are on our own. We create the safety for ourselves and for our kids. We get to create the peace and the thrive. We get to create and cultivate the environment. And I get that I have not always, even as an adult, made us safe. And I get why you might have doubt that I would make us safe now. But I ask for you to look over the last 4 years. Have we been safe? And 2 years ago, when I felt very specifically led to let go of this achievement, let go of this perfectionism, let go of this do, and enter this time frame of be and surrender and allow and flow, has there been one time in all of that our mortgage wasn't paid? That we didn't have money for gas? That we were not provided for? And that part of myself couldn't object to it. Factually, that has been proven. And I said, again, I understand why and where you are. I don't have hate, I get it. But I've got this. If you can trust me, with this, I got this. Maybe you could do something else now. If you're willing to let me take control of our safety, if you're willing to trust that I can do that, maybe you could have fun and find some other calling. I think you're probably good at a lot of things. If you can't figure out what you want to do right now, it's okay. You could sit and you can watch and you can build trust with me over whether I will continue to make us safe or not. But rest in the fact the last 2 years I have. We've had more peace, we've had more thrive, and we've had more joy in the past years of not doing, but instead being, allowing, flowing. And I get that right now that's not your default. But maybe you'll learn to love to surf in the tide that you once fought. It's this pattern of when you have these moments, we've tried denigrating ourselves, we've tried shutting ourselves down, we've tried shaming ourselves, we've tried so many different things of the patterns and mechanisms we've seen other people do at us, and then we do it to ourselves. Understandable. But it doesn't get us to a different place where we want to be. So let's try something different. The pattern is give yourself space to feel. Give yourself the empathy that you would your best friend when you're feeling it. Allow that to just sit and steep so that part of you can relax in it before you ever enter the, okay, can you trust me? Can you let me? Can we look at this with the things that we have learned and we've experienced and point to the histories and the places that we've seen this to be true? These facts, these like touchstones of where we know that worth isn't to do with productivity. Where you look at nature and you see the birds play or the trees stand still. Whatever are those touchstones for you, before you get to those touchstones and helping yourself see that it can trust you, it starts with connection, it starts with understanding, it starts with the empathy. It's practice that's uncomfortable. It's a practice that takes practice. But it's a practice that you're worth cultivating, you're worth doing it. Anyway, I hope these crazy stories about how my triggers show up make you feel a little less alone, maybe feeling a little less crazy because there's other people who are more crazy than you. But I also hope that the way that I walk through how I cope and deal with those triggers might give you something to try, some perspective to see. And if you have some tips or tricks, please feel free to comment and give your share your tips to other people, because This journey of healing can be very isolating, it can make you feel very alone, but you're not. There's so many other people who are on this journey, and it's very difficult. The more you feel alone, the easier it is to feel like a failure and defeated and quit. But you're worth continuing. You're worth the effort. You're worth the energy.